Hello friends, and welcome back to the Mothership. Today we are doing our very own dry rub and making some delicious home-style pork spare ribs. Let's get started. Here is a rack of spare ribs. First thing we're going to do is get a nice trim on these. Now that we have the big piece taken off, you can obviously keep this. You can use it for other cooking. You can throw it on right now for a snack. Just keep in mind that these little pieces of cartilage in there are kind of hard to eat around. I'm going to take off a little bit of this fat right here because this isn't going to be eaten. Usually don't have to do anything on spare ribs, but sometimes you get some big pockets and I like to trim that down a bit. Now quite often I will take off the last rib here just because there's not much meat on it and it dries out pretty quickly. I think I'm just going to take this right here and have this as a little snack while I'm cooking. But these ribs are pretty much trimmed down. The last thing we want to do is get the membrane off. Sometimes these can be a pain in the butt, but what we're going to do is just get a butter knife underneath the membrane. Get a finger underneath there, and then just pull it off. If you need grip, you can obviously use a paper towel like that. That looks good enough. There is some membrane underneath this section of meat here. I used to try and get off as much meat as I could so I could take down the membrane underneath here, but it's really not that big a deal. These are fine as is. You want to get just the majority of it off. Now the next step in prep, guys, if you follow my videos, you know it's going to be salted down. I do a ratio of half a teaspoon per pound of meat. There's obviously a whole bunch of bone in here, so for ribs I do about half of that. So after taking off the flap, these are about 4 pounds. So I'll aim for a meat weight of about 2 pounds, which means I need a teaspoon of kosher salt. Obviously, you just want to get everything coated down. We don't really need to bother with the bone side because it's not going to absorb there. We just want to get everything nice and good, just like that. And we're done. Now this is going to go into the fridge until all that salt is absorbed into the meat. Then we'll come back and put our rub on. While we wait for that salt to be absorbed, let's throw together a dry rub. I'm going to start with some garlic, add some cayenne pepper, some cumin, a bunch of paprika, some oregano, coarse black pepper, and some sugar. To make sure everything gets mixed together, I'm going to put it into a shaker, and then we're going to use this on our ribs. About an hour later, and you can see all the salt has been absorbed. And there's still some tackiness on there because basically it's drawn the water out, so we don't need to put a binder on. If you want, you can use whatever binder you want. Some people like to use mustard. Some people like to use just some pickle juice. Some people use olive oil. You can use whatever you want. I don't think we need it, but we are going to coat down these ribs with our rub. Now that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to put them back into the fridge until I'm ready to throw them onto my smoker. Alright, we are going to use the pellet smoker today, and I have it up to temp at 180 degrees, which is where I start most of my long cooks. Your pellet smoker is going to get the most amount of its smoke coming out at the lower temperatures, so I always start at about 180, and then I bump it up after a couple hours to working temperature of either 225 or 250. At this point, just going to get her on, close it up, let it do its thing, and we'll come back in a couple hours and see how it looks. Also, here's my little snack. I'm going to throw that on as well. Alright, we're about 3.5 hours in, and I just bumped the temperature up to 225. I also gave it a spritz. I'm using Dr. Pepper today because I don't have any hard cider, which is my usual go-to. But we're basically just going to keep watching it. Don't start spritzing until your bark is set like this has. Bark is set when you can do that and not really having anything come off. So this is good to go. I'm going to spritz it when anything starts to look dry. If you're using something with a fire that's like, say, over here, or I guess I should have my hand in focus, but if you're using something with like a fire over here, you might want to keep moving these around and keep spritzing this side because that's the side directly at the fire. Since our fire is from below, the heat's going straight up, so we should be okay here. But going to keep spritzing every maybe half an hour or when things start to look dry. Bump the temperature up like I did, and now we are just running until we get to the point where we have the right pullback in the bend, and I'll show you what that looks like when it's ready to go. Temperature that we're looking for will be somewhere around 195 plus. We're in the stall right now, so we're at about 160 something, 162 is what it looks like. It'll stall between 155 and 170, but just push right through there. I'm not wrapping. Let's get them keep doing their thing, and we'll come back when it's time to go to the next step. We are a little bit over 6 hours, and these are ready, guys. So when I check for my ribs, what I like to do, grab them in the center, then check to see how much they bend. You can see they're breaking the top, but they're not completely falling apart. Got about a 45-degree angle. This would be, 180 degrees. These look good to me. It's called the flapper test, is what I like to call it. These are done. And we can eat them right now, but what I'm gonna do, since we have about 45 minutes before we're ready to eat, I'm gonna toss them some tin foil and just let them rest. You could absolutely throw some butter, maybe some sugar, anything you want to let them rest in there, but they're done. They're just gonna get wrapped up. And then when we're ready to eat them, I'll come back and I'll show you how we did. Now, if I'm being honest, guys, when I do ribs, 90% of the ribs I'm gonna do are going to be wet, whether that's, barbecue sauce or if I'm going in Asian style, but I'm pretty much always doing wet ribs. I usually don't do just dry rub, but I mean, these look great. Nice little smoke ring on there. Smell delicious. This particular rub, it's not that barbecue-y taste. It's very home style. It's got a lot of good, herbs. You got some oregano in there, some garlic, some paprika. It's got good flavors, and altogether, it's a really good rib. If you're not looking for something super barbecue-y, but if you do want to have a dipping sauce, this type of rib is actually really good with just a dip on there or just have them be plain. Most importantly, though, it's been a long cook, guys, and I am starving, so it's time to give the old-fashioned chomp. Now, we cooked these to about 199 degrees, honestly, which is a little over 6 hours. They had enough time for everything to get to the point where they just were basically about to fall apart, but they had that nice bend to them. The flap test, as I like to call it. But it's time to give the old-fashioned chomp, guys. Let's see how we did. Now, this rub has a ton of flavor, guys. If you want it to be spicier, you can add some more chipotle or some chili powder. We have just a little bit of cayenne pepper, but you can obviously add more. The garlic powder, you can always dial that up or down depending on your taste. The salt that we do separately, this is the way I do all my meats, but it allows you to dial in how much salt you want. If you want to throw MSG in there, I think anywhere between 25% to 50% of your kosher salt level is how much MSG you should use. But in general, this is a really, really good rib. And it's a great rib to just have, with a whole bunch of other things on your menu. If you have some, elote or some just straight corn, or you have some salads. These are a great rib, and you can add some dipping sauces around for people to get the flavor that they're looking for. I love this one. This is actually a recipe that I've kind of built off of one of my friend's mother's recipes, so it's a really good one that I've been doing for a long time. Huge fan. But what I want to hear from you guys, do you guys usually do dry rubs or do you do sauced ribs? Usually I'm just doing sauced ribs, but I'd love to hear what your guys' thoughts are. Dry rub with some different sauces around, is that the way to do it? Love to hear from you guys. But most importantly, cook something absolutely fantastic, and I'll catch you guys on the next UFO barbecue. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.